Ever been through a loss so profound, it felt like navigating an impossible maze? That's where bereavement counselors step in, kind of like compassionate guides for those grappling with grief. You've been diving into RoleCatcher's resources on this career path, and we're right here with you to unpack it all.
And it's a path that's far more multifaceted than many people realize. The role goes way beyond just offering words of comfort.
I'm ready to have my assumptions challenged, so tell me, what's the real scope of a bereavement counselor's work?
Imagine being the steady hand someone clings to when their world has been turned upside down. You'd provide emotional and practical support, walking alongside families through the immediate shock of a loss, navigating the complexities of hospice care, and even helping them plan memorial services.
It sounds incredibly demanding, being so deeply present during such raw and vulnerable moments.
It is. And it's not just about one-on-one support, either. RoleCatcher highlights how bereavement counselors also train other professionals and even entire communities to better understand and respond to grief.
That's interesting. It's like they're creating ripples of support that extend far beyond the individual. What kind of training are we talking about?
It could be anything from coaching healthcare workers on sensitive communication techniques to educating community members on how to offer genuine, helpful support to someone who's grieving. It's about building a network of understanding and empathy.
So it's not just about working in hospitals or hospices then. Where else might a bereavement counselor find themselves?
You're right, it's not limited to clinical settings. Bereavement counselors might work in community centers, funeral homes, even private practices. Because let's face it, grief doesn't adhere to a schedule or pick a convenient location.
That's a really good point. You could encounter someone grappling with a loss anywhere. It makes me think about the emotional toll this kind of work must take. RoleCatcher uses the term emotionally challenging, which feels almost like an understatement.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart. You're constantly exposed to grief, often raw and unfiltered. This means developing incredible resilience and unwavering self-care practices to avoid burnout is essential.
It makes you wonder, how do you cultivate that kind of resilience when your work revolves around such heavy emotions? It makes you wonder what kind of person thrives in that environment. Is there a specific personality type drawn to bereavement counseling, or is it more about the skills you bring to the table?
That's a fascinating question. Naturally, empathy and compassion are crucial, but RoleCatcher reveals it takes a blend of unexpected skills to truly excel in this field.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of skills are we talking about?
Well, they emphasize social perceptiveness as being incredibly important.
Social perceptiveness, so it's more than just being a good listener.
Exactly. It's about picking up on those subtle, nonverbal cues, understanding why someone might react in a certain way, even if they're not explicitly saying it. Think about it, grief can manifest in so many ways, sometimes anger, sometimes silence. A bereavement counselor needs to be able to read those signals and respond with sensitivity and insight.
It's like you're reading between the lines of their grief. Fascinating.
Yeah.
What else did RoleCatcher highlight?
Active listening is another big one, but even that takes on a whole new meaning in this context.
What do you mean?
It's not just about hearing the words someone is saying, it's about being truly present. Asking clarifying questions that show you're trying to understand their experience on a deeper level, reflecting back what you're hearing to ensure you're both on the same page. It's about creating a safe space for them to process their emotions without judgment.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there any skills that surprised you?
RoleCatcher actually emphasizes coordination and persuasion as being really important, which I found really interesting.
Coordination and persuasion. Those seem a little unexpected in the context of grief counseling. How do those come into play?
Think about it. A bereavement counselor isn't working in isolation. They're often the hub of a larger network of support doctors, social workers, funeral directors, even support groups. Coordinating all of those moving parts, advocating for your client's needs, ensuring they're getting the right resources at the right time, that requires some serious interpersonal and organizational skills.
And persuasion.
Well, sometimes you might encounter families resistant to certain types of support or resources, even if they'd benefit from them. Persuasion in this sense isn't about coercion. It's about gently guiding them, providing information and encouragement, empowering them to make choices that support their healing journey, even if it's difficult at first.
So it's a delicate dance of empathy, expertise, and advocacy. What about formal education? What does someone need on their resume to even enter this field?
RoleCatcher's analysis points to a foundation in psychology counseling or social work as being essential. But here's where it gets really interesting. They also highlight the importance of specialized fields like thanatology.
Thanatology. That sounds a little intimidating. What is that exactly?
It's literally the study of death and dying. I know it sounds a little intense, but it actually makes perfect sense in this context. Thanatology delves into the cultural, ethical, and psychological aspects of death, giving you a much deeper understanding of how humans process loss across different cultures and belief systems.
That makes sense. It's not just about addressing the emotional fallout. It's about understanding the broader context of death and how it shapes our experiences.
Precisely. And this leads us to a crucial point that RoleCatcher emphasizes the importance of continuous learning in this field. They stress staying ahead of the curve through workshops, professional journals, online resources, always evolving your understanding of grief and its impact.
It sounds like this is a field where you never really stop learning. There's always something new to discover about grief and how to support those experiencing it. But all of this knowledge is really only valuable if you can apply it right.
Well,
What does RoleCatcher say about actually getting started in this line of work?
they're big proponents of hands-on experience. Volunteering at hospices, hospitals, or grief support organizations is a fantastic way to dip your toes in, so to speak.
And I imagine those experiences would be invaluable for developing the empathy and social perceptiveness we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. Plus, it demonstrates initiative and a genuine desire to serve others, which speaks volumes to potential employers.
It's one thing to say you're passionate about this kind of work, but it's another thing entirely to show up and do the work, even in a volunteer capacity. What about specializing within the field? Is that something RoleCatcher recommends?
They do. As you gain experience, they suggest considering if there's a specific niche that resonates with you.
So you could focus on working with children who've lost a parent, or maybe specializing grief related to terminal illnesses.
Exactly. Specialization allows you to hone your expertise and potentially have a more profound impact within that chosen area.
It's like finding your calling within a calling. Now, for those who are ambitious and want to climb the career ladder, what advice does RoleCatcher offer? How do you stand out in a field as important as this one?
They highlight the power of becoming a thought leader within the field. Presenting at conferences, publishing articles in professional journals, those are great ways to demonstrate your knowledge and commitment.
It's about going beyond just practicing bereavement counseling. It's about contributing to the evolving understanding of grief itself. That's impressive.
And of course, there's the traditional routes like pursuing advanced degrees or certifications. Those can open doors to leadership roles and expand your impact even further.
So it's a combination of hands-on experience, continuous learning, and strategic self-promotion. And speaking of resources, how does RoleCatcher itself fit into this picture? We've talked a lot about their insights, but what exactly do they offer job seekers?
Their platform is incredible. We've touched on their career guides, but they have over 3,000 of them covering a vast range of professions. And for those nail-biting interviews, they have a database of 120,000 practice interview questions.
120,000. That's incredible. You'd be ready for anything with that kind of prep. But they don't just leave you hanging with a mountain of questions, do they?
Not at all. This is where their AI tools come in. Imagine getting feedback on your interview performance tailored to the specific job you're applying for. RoleCatcher can do that.
That's amazing. It sounds like they're using technology to demystify the job search process, taking some of the stress out of it.
Exactly. They're a fantastic example of how tech can be leveraged to empower job seekers. But as we've discussed, the heart of this profession lies in human connection and empathy.
That's a beautiful way to bring it full circle. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of bereavement counseling, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listener with?
You've gleaned so much insight from RoleCatcher's resources, but as you continue exploring this path, consider this. How might the increasing presence of technology in our lives impact the future of grief support? Could it create new avenues for connection and healing? It's a question worth pondering.
It certainly is. And on that note, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the multifaceted and deeply rewarding world of bereavement counseling. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the things that matter.